Hey, how's it going?
Good, Ting Song. How are you?
Not too bad. So you're home?
Yeah, home at the moment.
Uh, how's work? Did you work today?
No, haven't been working for almost 3 weeks now.
Oh
We've been
wow.
closed for 3 weeks fully.
Okay, you guys are having partial lockdown right now, right?
Yeah, so it's what we would consider between stage two to stage three lockdown.
Oh, okay.
So
What do you mean by
basically,
yeah?
restriction in terms of movement, a lot of social isolation,
Right.
um, social distancing measures, limitations on public gatherings.
Mm-hmm.
Movement is basically being restricted to mainly essential activities. So, for example, going out shopping, going out grocery shopping,
Right.
um, doctor's appointments, going to banks, and so on, and limiting the number of people who are heading out to and being able to be in a certain gathering. So, for example, if you're at home in a household, that's not a problem. You can
Right.
only have one extra person coming from outside to join you in your house. You can
Okay.
go out and exercise
Right.
as a family in a household, but
Right.
only one extra person from another household with you.
I see. How about going out?
Mm.
Like say going for groceries or shop, like buying the essential stuff. Is
Mm.
it limited to a person in the car, or do they kind of have that kind of rules that you cannot travel more than one person?
So what they do limit it to is if their people are from the same household, they can go out
Right,
together.
right.
And you can only have one other person from another household joining you.
Okay, I see. So how
Mm.
about like say going out for things, basically if two-person in a car, is there a distance you cannot go into, like you cannot travel far? How's that like?
Yeah. Yeah, look, there's no particular distance that they mention, but what they do is that they do check up on you once in a while. So
Right,
it all depends on the different states because, like the US, we've got different states here in Australia.
right,
And what happens is that there's the state government that reinforces the local laws in each state.
right,
So it's quite interesting. Like, each state will declare their state of emergencies at different times, depending on the number of cases, how bad it is. And
right.
at the moment, I think the strictest would still be Victoria and Queensland and also Western Australia at the moment in terms of their state of emergency and their restrictions.
I see. So,
Mm.
is there a restriction in terms of you cannot travel from one state to the other?
Yeah. So at the moment, most of the states have closed their borders, so you're not allowed to go interstate. Or if you do, it's only for certain things, for certain essential work. For example, we have a lot of what we call fly in, fly out workers, people who work in the mines, go there
Right,
for about 1 or 2 weeks, go on home. So they can still fly in and then fly out. But other than that, for example, if you are going into another state and it's for a certain matter, you need to quarantine for 14 days there before you can actually go out.
right. And you are in
Mm.
Canberra, right? Is it one of the
Yeah.
strictest one, or is it like kind of still okay?
So Canberra is pretty okay because we haven't really closed our borders with New South Wales.
Right,
So Canberra is like federal territory in Kuala Lumpur.
right,
So it's the Australian Capital Territory.
right,
And it's like KL is within Selangor. Like so here
right.
we are within New South Wales.
I
So
see.
it's hard because there's a lot of people here, especially healthcare workers who come from New South Wales just across the border to work here.
Right,
So they haven't actually closed our borders in
right.
the ACT.
I see. But it's still restricted to essential things. So non-essential businesses, everything is closed down.
Most businesses are closed down. But go and
Right,
figure this one out, all right? So they closed down the restaurants, they closed
right,
down the cafes. They are
right.
allowed to do takeaways. So just to let you know, we got Papa Rich here. And my
Okay.
local Papa Rich actually opened today. So
Uh,
couldn't wait, had to have dinner there. But it's
I
all takeaways, all right? All
see.
takeaways. But they're
Right.
still allowing hair salons to open. So hair salons are considered essential.
No
Go
shit.
figure.
Oh, wow. So,
Go
okay.
figure.
But yeah, it is kind of tricky, like here during the second phase, so we and so we kind of had extension from the second phase, and then now we closed down for another 2 weeks. And there were talks about having the barbers or the hair salon sort of open up, but there was a lot of outcry, so lots of protests, and a lot of hair salon decided not to open for safety reasons. So so eventually it's all closed still. So you see all our messy hair. So
Tell me about my hair, man.
talking about Malaysian food. So you are Malaysian, right? You are formerly Malaysian. Where are you from in Malaysia?
So I'm actually from PJ, so Petaling Jaya. I grew up in
Right.
I actually grew up in Section 5 Gussie Hill.
Oh,
And
nice.
but at the age of 12, I went to Singapore to an ASEAN scholarship.
Yes,
So
that
I
was
spent six.
the scholarship to go to. Yeah, to go for. And you went there for about 6 years. Am I right?
Yeah,
Or
6 years. So I did my O and A levels in Singapore. And after that, I went straight to Sydney Uni on scholarship too. And
right,
then graduated 2000, and I've been in Australia ever since.
right. And then you started your private practice since 2010.
Yes, that's correct.
Wow. Well, it's been a long time.
A very long time, very long time. It's
That's
quite an interesting path because, when I first started working, I wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon,
right,
but did quite a interesting surgical training. Ended up
right,
doing a bit of neurosurgery,
right,
and actually did quite a bit of training in anesthetics and intensive care.
right,
But reached a certain stage where I realized that just didn't want to really continue down that pathway. So took a little bit of a break and
right.
ended up doing cosmetic surgery.
Well, it's a nice field to go into. It's
It is, it is.
it's the field to go into right now. Right,
Definitely, definitely this
right.
the field.
And how is the situation? So we know aesthetic medicine has bloomed quite a bit in Australia, but how has it been so far? How's the progress so far in Australia in terms of aesthetic medicine and cosmetic surgery?
Look, I think Australia has quite a conservative population. Look, I shouldn't generalize. Let me put it this way. It all
Hmm.
depends on where you are in Australia. I
Right,
mean, if you're from Sydney or Melbourne, which are the major cosmetic surgery, cosmetic procedure sort of hubs, there's
hmm,
a lot of surgery going on. But
right,
if you're in some place like ACT, ACT is quite an interesting place in the sense that the population here is quite conservative.
right.
So
Well,
they're
what do
not really
you
in,
ACT?
sorry?
What do you mean by ACT?
Oh, ACT is Australian Capital Territory. That's where Canberra
Ah,
is.
I see, I
Okay.
see. Okay.
Hmm. So in ACT, we do have quite a conservative population. So people here are not that open to surgery. They are more into non-invasive procedures.
Right,
So when I first trained, I trained in Sydney where we did quite a lot of liposuction, which is our mainstay in body sculpting.
right,
But when I came to Canberra, it was quite an interesting change where people were still quite suspicious of it. And a
right,
simple way to put it is that ACT is probably about 3 to 4 years behind what's happening in Sydney.
right.
So if something is happening in Sydney now, give it about three to
Mm,
four years and it'll become really big in Canberra. So almost like,
okay.
we are smarter and we let the Sydney people, become the
Try out
guinea
the new.
pigs before we just, yeah, exactly.
Right,
Exactly. So it's an interesting phenomenon. But what I find is that more and more people are now into the non-invasive sort of procedures. So like injectables, anti-wrinkle injections, dermal fillers, biostimulants, non-invasive body sculpting like cool sculpting. And that's why, in an interesting way, I come from a chain of clinics called Cosmos Clinic that started by my friend up in Sydney. So
right.
I own the franchise here in Canberra. There's five
Okay,
around the country.
I
We
see.
are probably the smallest franchise because based on the population, Canberra has a population of about 250,000, while Sydney's 2 million plus.
Right.
But even based on the population in Canberra, we do the most cool sculpting cycles in the whole country.
Right. Yeah, you're the cool sculpting
Mm.
king, man. You're the cool sculpting king over there.
Look who's talking there.
But is that because a lot of people in the ACT are more prone towards going for non-invasive body contouring comparing to surgical body contouring then?
Let me put it this way. I think body sculpting is an interesting area, isn't it?
Right.
I think that I always say that the more result you want, the more drastic results you want, the more invasive the procedure needs to be.
Right.
So when people come and see me, the consultation process is really important. So I'll talk to them, I'll tell them, look, what do you want to achieve? What do you want to get out of anything I can give you? And once we've discussed and we've ascertained what they want, then I'll actually recommend the appropriate treatment to achieve what they want. And that may be cool sculpting, that may be liposuction, or that may be something more invasive like a full tummy tuck and so on. Right. And then depending on the level of risk that they're willing to take, and also the amount of money they're willing to pay, if it's not going to be, if they're not willing to pay for a tummy tuck, but they still want a tummy tuck result, then I'll be very honest with them and tell them that's not going to be achievable. Right. So here in Canberra, I find most of the patients have already come in and say, look, they come from a group that says, look, Dr. Lee, no surgery. Right. No surgery. Then I'll say, good. In that case, I have no hesitation in offering you cool sculpting because it's, to me, personally anyway, it's the best non-invasive body sculpting technique. Right.
I see. That's great. You've been doing fabulous work with it.
Yeah, I hope so.
So talking about the numbers of COVID-19 in Australia, it seems like the numbers are not big. If you look at the numbers of diagnosed patients, it's about 6,000 plus. The death rate's it's double digit comparing to you look at other countries, especially because in Europe the numbers are sky high. In US it's tremendous, and you guys been able to control it with double digit, just like Malaysia, we have Thailand, Singapore, UAE, Iraq, Estonia, Andorra, etc., etc. And how is the situation? Is the government acting very fast to it, or is it because it's too widespread that it just didn't really roll out too easily?
Mm-hmm. Look, I have to say kudos to the government. They have done a really, really good job in Australia. I think the biggest thing that I realized with the whole situation is that it escalated really quickly. I think you may have remembered that I was actually in Singapore to visit my parents over the Chinese New Year period. Right. And it's during that time things started to come to the surface where people started to realize what's happening and so on. Right. And because I was in Singapore, because of their experience with SARS previously, I could see that they were getting very worried and things really escalated. Right. And by the time I left to come back to Australia, I was actually very surprised that Australia was taking it very seriously. And things really started to escalate. They started shutting down the borders, started to quarantine people. And look, having seen what happened in SARS, because I've had a lot of friends who was in Singapore, all the restrictions, social isolation, and so on, I understood what was going to happen. Right. I understood what was going to happen. Right. And in a way, I was very impressed with the way the government handled this. Right. Now, the government will never keep everyone happy. Right. It will never keep everyone happy. Right. So what we found is that there's always critics saying that they're not doing enough, and critics who are saying they're doing more than enough, more than what they should be. Sure. And I think they struck a really good balance between the economy and also the pandemic. Right. Because I think there's nothing worse than having a pandemic actually destroy the economy and actually causing more long-term pain than short-term pain. Sure. I think our numbers are very low. I think they've done really well. There's really talk on lifting restrictions in the near future.
Okay.
But this is where it's going to be fraught with danger, because it's not as if we've eradicated the disease yet.
Right.
I think the biggest milestone, or at least two milestones that I can see in the coming future, that's going to change the whole course of this restrictions and lockdowns.
Right.
It's going to be a cure, and
Right.
B, a vaccine.
Right.
A cure is not definitive. A
Right.
cure means that people will have to fall sick.
Right.
They will still have to take the treatment and then hopefully
Right.
get better.
Right.
The vaccine is definitely the definitive moment that we know that we can get on top of the situation.
Right.
And as we know, the vaccine is going to be 9 to 12 months away.
It will take some time, definitely.
It will take some time. So
yeah, you think?
So I think there's going to be rolling restrictions. It's just a
Right.
matter of whether they're going to be escalate or reducing. And I think it's going to be one of those. It's going to go up and down.
Right.
And that's where a lot of people do not understand what a pandemic is.
Yes.
Because what they believe is, oh, we locked down for 1-2 months, that's it, we'll come out and we're back to normal.
Exactly.
No, we're not back to normal until we get a vaccine.
Yeah. And this is what we see in Singapore, right? They kind of started very early, but they kind of relaxed a little bit. And now we see the numbers climbing up, and they went to so-called circuit breaker right now. And but I think among all these countries, when you look at Taiwan, Hong Kong, Australia, Singapore, those are the countries that right after China sort of came out with the diagnosis and saying that, okay, this is a dangerous thing. Everybody starts to get nervous and start to do things very quickly. And I think that is the crucial thing, because when you start it early, when you start to be vigilant about it very early, and I think that is why the numbers are, you look at Taiwan, Hong Kong, they're so close to China, they're single digits still, like in terms of death. So those are things that we see when you act fast, and that's where you get to get it under control very fast.
Yeah. And also don't forget, Ting Song, with these countries, they had first-hand experience with with
SARS.
epidemics. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
SARS and MERS.
Right.
They learned the hard way what it was like. Here in Australia, there was hardly any signs of SARS or MERS at all,
right,
because of what they've done there. So they had their own CDCs, their infection control centers and so on. And that's what was the biggest thing. They already had their protocols.
Right.
Here in Australia, did you realize we never had a CDC at all?
Right.
Even though there were plans, people understood, but they never saw the need for a CDC.
But why was it acting so fast initially? Was it because there's a lot of Chinese population there from mainland China that they get worried about? Or was it because they are very close, a relationship with China CDC, that they kind of get a lot of first-hand information from there?
Oh, I think it's just because there were some really smart people behind the scenes who managed to get government cooperation on this.
Okay, I think that's a blessing. That's good, because last thing that you want. But I always find Australia, it's very funny, because when you go to this bloody island that's far away from everything, and there are a lot of things that you cannot bring in, like you cannot bring in food, you cannot bring in plants. There's a lot of restriction in terms of trying to control that things doesn't get in there. And I think, was it because of that kind of, they always have this mentality that, oh, there's a bug outside, and because of this new bug that they never heard about, they're like, okay, let's shut down our country and don't let this bug.
I suspect that you what you say, there's a truth to it. All right, there's already a bit of awareness, and because our borders, even though they are huge, there's only certain entry points, or legal entry points anyway, and I think that's why it's pretty easy to actually control them to a certain degree. I mean, there's been a few things that have what we call slipped through the gates, if you would have as well would have described it. And that was with the cruise ship in New South Wales, where they've arrived, and despite well, I mean, there's conspiracy theories. Some people say, the cruise people were not telling the truth, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But there were not enough monitoring. People were not being quarantined from that. And that has actually accounted for quite a few of the deaths. As you mentioned before, there's 68 deaths in Australia to date. And it actually accounted for quite a few of them.
Right.
And that's where we realized that at the end of the day, a lot of the cases are not local. There's no community transmission to start off. They had to come from overseas. So shutting down the borders and quarantining people was the way to go.
Right.
And they've done that extremely well. Very, very proud of the government actually. And that's what's been saving a lot of people here.
Right. Talking about conspiracy theory, there has a lot of new conspiracy theory coming out. Some say the bugs from China, Wuhan lab. Some talks about American labs. And how is the whole sentiment in Australia? Are they like, what the hell? We don't care. It's outside of Australia.
Oh, look, I think at the end of the day, there's still a feeling that this is a China virus.
Okay.
That is originated in China. That not to say that it is caused by the Chinese, but it originated in China. And unfortunately, it's actually led to quite a lot of racist sentiments towards Asians. So as I've heard recently, there are a lot of comments, lots of people being harassed out in the public, a lot of Asians being harassed in the public. I personally have not experienced that at all. I think it's mainly because I do speak with an Australian accent, so most people won't criticize me for that. But I think there's still that feeling. In terms of conspiracies, everyone has their own thoughts about it. The funny thing though is that one of the group of people that we do hear a lot here in Australia, but have sort of kept quiet for a while, is the anti-vaxxers.
Okay.
Yeah, so for a while there, we haven't heard anything, but it's starting to surface again. And the funny thing is that, it's pretty interesting. But the funny thing to me is that this is why we have vaccinations. This is why we develop vaccines to actually prevent pandemics like this.
Right. Do you think they will scramble to go for vaccines if ever there's a vaccine coming out? Or they are still like,
no comments. Politically sensitive.
Yeah. So is that bad? Because we in the past we heard about how there was some xenophobia around in Australia. And do you think this COVID-19 can kind of sort of bring all this resurfacing of this kind of sentiment or this kind of discrimination going on?
There has always been a degree of discrimination.
Right.
Okay, there always has been a degree. I think at the end of the day, it surfaces a bit more, but what we find is that there's a lot of movements by the authorities to actually clamp this down straight away, criticizing this, putting it down.
Right.
And that's good. That is good. So you got to nip it in the bud before it starts to escalate.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, if you go to Melbourne or Sydney these days, there are I went to Melbourne once. I felt like going back to Malaysia. More Malaysian restaurants than we have in here.
Exactly. Oh, look, the funny thing is that when you say you're Chinese Malaysian, they say, oh, you're not Chinese. It's quite an interesting thing.
Right. So how about this kind of I've seen some of the news from the ABC from Australia, and it seems like there is a strong anti-Chinese sentiment over there. Is that a small group of people, or is it like it's getting more and more people having that kind of sentiment?
As I always say, that there's always a little bit of an undercurrent of racism, and don't worry, it's not only towards the Chinese, it's towards Asians. There's a bit of reverse prejudice happening too, and I think it's just a matter of a small group of people who express it publicly, who tend to get the most focus or the most coverage or most publicity on it.
Right.
To be honest, look, I've pretty much almost all my friends are Caucasians,
Right.
and you know what? There's no problems at all. There's no
Ex-
problems at all.
Exactly. I always find Australian very friendly, and I think
Mm,
perhaps this is just one side of the story, and I see it. Maybe this COVID-19 is the one that actually brings out all the friendliness and bring people together because we're fighting something else. We're fighting a virus, right?
very good.
Yeah.
Um, it's been, let me put it this way, life has been very interesting in Australia in the last almost 5 to 10 years.
Hmm.
I think Australia has dodged a lot of recession, dodged a lot of issues, and it's grown remarkably. Economy has been strong, housing has been strong. It's a really, really lucky country. And to this day, I still say it's a very lucky country.
Right.
I think this COVID has personally, let me put it, in the last 3 to 5 years, I've been so busy with work, I've hardly had time to stop. When I look at my daughters now, my daughters are going to be 17 and 15 this year,
Right.
and I look back and thought, my God, I started when they were, about 10 years ago, they were still kids. And I look back and thought, what have I missed?
Right.
And what this has done is it's actually made me stop. And I think it's made a lot of people stop.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, not voluntarily, but
Right.
we've all stopped and it's given a chance to take stock of what's happening. And it
Hmm.
made me realize a lot of things that are happening, a lot of things that I've missed out, a lot of things that I should be doing that I haven't done for a long time. Like I moved into my house 4 years ago, okay, to be closer to my daughter's school.
Hmm.
And when I first moved in here, I dropped in to see a neighbor who's across the road. So he's used to ex-army guy, fought in World War II. He was 88. His wife is 82.
Right.
They were one of the originals in this area.
Right.
So they're telling me, had a good chat. And I
Hmm.
realized I actually haven't spoken to them for 3 to 4 years. I've
Wow.
been so caught up with life.
Yeah.
And when this happened, the first thing I thought about was them.
Hmm.
Thought, oh, they are old, they are vulnerable, they're the ones who, if this happens to them, that, they're going to cop it. So, and the first thing I thought, I should go across, talk to them again, see how
Right.
they are, offer my help, leave my number with them, and they can call me anytime they need me. So to me, that was this. If I could do something like this for my community, I'm sure a
Right.
lot of people out there are. And you can see a lot of people are actually starting to come together, starting to help the more vulnerable, the
Right.
older people in their communities, and in fact, also helping out the healthcare workers at the front line.
Right. And I do agree. And I mean, COVID-19 actually sort of made us pause and think and sort of pull us away from the busy schedule. And now we are looking into things that we really want in life. Like you say, spending more time with family if you could. Well, some of us get quarantined. We couldn't really meet our parents. Anyways, we are totally trying to like physically distancing, but in a way it connects a lot of people. People are on Zoom, people are on lots of different chats, we are on Instagram Live. And I think that is one thing that perhaps it brings out a lot of good things for us as well, yeah.
It does. And I think at the end of this, I think the whole world will come out a lot better. I think
Mhm.
humanity will be a lot better. Society will be a lot better.
Right.
And look, a lot of us will come out with scars, whether it's
Hmm.
personal scars where we have lost someone, that we love and so on. By the end of the day, I think we'll come out as better people.
Yeah. So, in the past few years, if you look at how Australia for the past 10 years, their economy has gone up and has been doing so well, except for there's one time that the oil and gas has been coming down a little bit. But
Mm.
fortunately, Australia is full of natural resources. You have a lot of mining going on as well. But
Mm.
would this COVID-19 actually kind of bring into recession for the first time? Do you think that it will actually
Mm.
have quite a big economical sort of impact in Australia.
What's interesting, I think a lot of people have already been saying that we were going to be heading into recession,
Right.
and it was going to be either this year or next year.
Right.
I think the coronavirus has actually just brought it forward.
Okay. Just expedite
So
the whole
it's
thing.
given us correct. It's expedited the whole thing, and it's given us the recession that we were heading into.
Right.
Now the problem with this particular recession is that it's hard to figure out how long it's going to be. And that's our problem because if we're talking about the vaccine, it's going to be 9 to 12 months.
Right.
So that's why governments from all around the world have been giving a lot of stimulus, trying to keep that economy afloat. And as we've known, quite a few countries has already approached the IMF for loans at the moment.
Right.
So that shows you how bad it is. Now, with any recession, I think recovery is going to be the biggest thing. So how are we going to recover out of this? And the ideal situation is we have a V-shaped recovery where we plunge very quickly and then we recover quickly. However, I think it's going to be based on the different industries. I think this recession is going to have more long-lasting effect than the last GFC. Unemployment is going to be very high. There's going to be a lot of long-term issues. So I don't think we're going to come out of it as well as we did previously with the GFC. It's going to be taking about 2 to 3 years.
Right. And is the government doing any stimulus plan, or are they doing any aids for the people in terms of that?
They're doing quite a lot of stimulus plans. So at the moment, I would say there's two main ones. The first one is what we call the job seeker. So the job seeker are for people who don't have a job, who've been laid off, and basically have to go on to Social Security. So they get a certain payment from the government on a weekly or fortnightly basis. Now, interestingly, on Monday, they will be looking at letting businesses register for what we call the job keeper. And this is quite a huge stimulus. So what's happening is that the government is basically wanting businesses to hang on to their employees.
Okay.
So rather than let them go and make them join the queue for the job seeker, they want them businesses to keep your employees, whether they are working or not. Okay.
Right.
So for example, if I'm fully shut down, I've stood down my employees, but I'm still keeping them because when I reopen, we'll start up again.
Right.
So what happens is that with these people, they will get actually a certain amount fortnightly.
Okay.
Regardless of how much they're making before, they'll get a certain amount. And that's good because I think what that does is it gives people a steady income. It will still help them to pay their mortgage or their rent and so on. It will still give them money to survive.
Yeah.
When we come out of it, when we reopen, my staff are still there. We will just hit the ground running, and I don't have to start all over again.
Yeah, it's fabulous. So yeah, in that sense, I think the social unrest and the whole economic depression will be less, recession will be less impact towards everybody's daily life, right?
Exactly. I think, like you said, social unrest, that's the biggest thing because I think if a lot of people are jobless, a lot of people are desperate, there's going to be more crimes and so on. And so this is a way of keeping social order, right? And keeping things safe and letting people have a chance to recover and come out of it in a good sort of position. Yeah. And I think it's going to help businesses too, because if businesses close down now, and when things get better, there's not as many businesses. Once again, it's going to affect a lot of the recovery. So even though we're going into a huge, huge debt that's going to take almost a generation to recover, I think it's actually worth it. A lot of the times when governments take over, when they win elections, one of the things they always say, we get into surplus soon, we get into surplus. No, I actually believe that at the end of the day, debt is good as long as you can explain why we go into debt.
Right.
And if the debt is to help the economy keep going, why not?
Yeah.
a lot of people will support going to debt as long as they can live.
Right. And keep the economy and people going. But one thing it's
Exactly.
good is I think Australians are actually pretty easygoing, laid back, friendly, how you
Mm.
name it. But and I think there's a lot of trust in terms of people towards the government, which is one of the key things that we see that if you compare to some other countries where there's a lockdown, where there's a lot of fight and social unrest, is because there's a lot of mistrust of the people
Mm.
towards the government. And I think one thing great about Australia is a lot of people actually trust the governments of what they are doing right now, right?
At the moment, yes. At the moment, yes. All right.
Uh,
It's actually interesting you brought it up because
mm,
I've always felt that there was quite a bit of distrust of the government in this
right.
country
Mm-hmm.
compared to a lot of other countries. And as you know, just before we went into this COVID situation and recession, we had the bushfires in Australia from
Right.
August last year.
Yeah.
And that was the biggest thing that was affecting a lot of people in this country. With that, I don't think the government, or at least the prime minister, came across very well.
Uh,
So yeah, from a PR sort of point
Point of
of
view.
view,
Yeah.
he didn't do the right things. He didn't say the right things.
I see.
And it did not look good. So there was a lot of distrust happening there.
I see.
But you
But
know
they
what?
come back after
The,
the COVID. They managed
the
to recover.
COVID is the opposite. Exactly, it's the opposite.
Right.
I think people are starting to realize that we actually do have a good government, and we do have a government that listens to the people, a government that actually does care about the country and is managing things properly. In the early days, of course, people did not understand. They did not understand why they were taking these restrictions or why they were not doing certain things, they were not closing the schools and so on.
Right.
And to someone actually put it really succinctly. They say it's all
Mm-hmm.
about timing.
Right.
All right. All these measures are there. They are all in the plan, but it's all about timing and it's all about the modeling. It's all about
Right.
the curve.
Right.
All right. If you do something, you give it about 2 weeks to see what the effects are. It doesn't
Right.
happen immediately. And if
Exactly.
it doesn't work well enough, then you escalate and then you do the next restriction or the next measure.
Sure.
And that's why we haven't needed to escalate to stage 3 or stage 4 lockdown
Right.
because we've flattened the curve quite successfully at this stage
Mm-hmm.
anyway.
Okay.
And our aim is not to eradicate or eliminate, not to eliminate like what New Zealand is doing.
Right.
New Zealand has actually escalated
That's full time.
up to stage 4
Right.
to eliminate the virus.
Right.
But the reason for that is also their health system. They do not have enough intensive care beds
Right.
to actually cope with a huge number of people needing ventilators. We have
We-
4 ventilator
Right.
beds.
Right.
Mm.
And we always make jokes that you have more sheep in New Zealand than human being. Right? How we get
I'm not saying anything.
Yeah. But it is good. But I have to see they actually have 0 deaths at the moment. But I think they probably are doing a good job over there as well.
Yeah. And it's based on their health capacity. Same as ours. Our health system capacity is a lot bigger. Hence, that's why we are able to let certain things still happen and not to go down that full lockdown pathway.
Exactly, and there's no right and wrong because there's no one size fits all because each country has their own cultural thing. They have their own things to consider, and you cannot just say every country actually goes into the China kind of lockdown. But then again, you cannot blame China because if they don't do that with that mass population and with their with how things were going at that time, they have no choice. They have to go into full lockdown. But for real sake, sheep do not catch COVID-19. we actually see animals actually caught COVID-19.
Yes.
Never, ever. But man, I'm
Oh,
So great. I was doing well for you over there, and I think
Mm.
it's actually pretty late over there. I better don't let you go this week. And it's great to catch up. And I think we have still more sessions to catch up with Fareed and the guys very soon. And well, stay well, stay safe.
Thank
We
you. Thank you. Same to you.
thanks for getting on this IG live together.
My pleasure. All right. You take care, things
Okay,
off. I'll see
you
you in a
too.
few weeks.
Okay, okay, bye
Yep.
bye.
Bye bye.